It's my pleasure to be here with you today, so I'm just going to do some brief introductions, and then we'll really get to the meat of the panel. So my name is Kate Akers. I'm so pleased to see so many familiar faces as well as some new ones. I am new with the Data Quality Campaign, but certainly not new to this work. At the Data Quality Campaign, I'm focused on policy implementation and best practices, but I really began my focus on cross-agency data over 15 years ago. I was the first researcher on the Kentucky P20 SLDS grant, right? So as that work transitioned, I was the executive director at KY Stats, and then I spent the last 5 years really with a deeper dive into post-secondary data for the post-secondary system in Pennsylvania. So a little bit about Data Quality Campaign. We heard just a little bit about it actually this morning, talking about the Data Champions Collaborative and that fantastic work. But the DQC advocates to change the role of data to ensure that data works for everyone navigating their education and workforce journey. So DQC's vision includes state recommendations to support data access and puts a focus on funding state longitudinal data systems and other agencies and work that really help support all of the initiatives that we've talked about here so far. We also have several resources out on our website, really thinking about state and local governments can use federal funding for educational data. That resource I know that these wonderful panelists contributed to as well. So I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves, and then we'll really build upon the panel that we just heard about and really talking about funding, federal funding impacts in particular on data innovation and collaboration. Tiffany. Oh, you have a microphone too.
Thank you so much. This is honestly my favorite conference of the year. 4 years ago in 2020, I was disappointed to not, well, I was at the Gates Foundation. I was hoping to fly to the conference, and that actually kicked off a big transition for all of us. It was in person, and I did it remotely, certain that I would be going back into the office soon. And my time in this work has been quite a while as well. We were reminiscing that 10 years ago in Arlington, we were both here for the SLDS conference. I was at the New Jersey Labor Department as someone on the WDQI grant, and so it's great to see connections from throughout that work. So just a little bit about me before I pass it on. I'm at the Department of Labor's Employment and Training Administration. I'm an enterprise program advisor there, and in that role, I work on projects that are at the intersection of data and technology with an eye towards program performance and supporting states to have the data that they need. And I'm excited to be on this panel today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Stack. I spent most of my career in the federal government, 27 years of it, at the Office of Management and Budget, overseeing education, income maintenance, and labor, and started something now called the OMB Evidence Team, which still exists. I did a stint in philanthropy for about 3 years, 2015 to 18, so I got a flavor of that and funded a lot of data infrastructure projects at the Arnold Foundation. And now I am a senior fellow at the Yale Tobin Center for Economic Policy and at the Federation of American Scientists. And I'm extremely focused on what are the things that the federal government can do to strengthen state and local data capacity, because that's where the action is. It's the state and local level. So I'll talk about those in a minute.
Wonderful. So we're going to talk about really the current state and some of the best practices that we're seeing from the field, and then we'll transition into really some emerging innovations, either at the state level or at the program or initiative level, and then really thinking about what's on the horizon. So what might we expect to see from the federal government to really help support this work in the future? So for this first question, I'm going to start with Kathy. So could you share maybe just one or two instances where you've seen states or programs or initiatives guided by best practices and federal guidance or support, and really those that have employed innovative approaches to fund this interagency data connection, enhance data governance, and really leverage this data effectively to get to those measurable outcomes?
So I think Robert Magoo mentioned earlier that I had done a paper on blended and braided funding and opportunities for state and local governments to strengthen their data and analytics capacity by combining funding. But to write that paper, since there's no one at the federal government who really understands how all the funding can come together, we went to the states and we found some pioneering jurisdictions that had gotten really creative about how to pull funding streams from different sources, put them together for building and sustaining their capacity. A couple of examples that stand out. First, understand what are those different federal funding streams. So you've got SLDS and WDQI grants that you probably all know about. But then there's this huge funding stream for Medicaid, where Medicaid finances roughly like 90% of the cost of building integrated eligibility systems. It's a huge resource. It dwarfs the WDQI and SLDS funding. And then recently, with the Rescue Plan and some of the stimulus grants and infrastructure, there's been sort of one-time large slugs of money going out to states. And some places were able to leverage Rescue Plan funds where it was explicit in the grants guidance that you could use it for data and evaluation capacity. A couple states that stood out to me in terms of models. One is Indiana. You probably know that Indiana has this very unified management performance hub. But essentially what they were able to do is leverage, the Medicaid funding that's going into their HHS system, the SLDS funding that built their SLDS activities, and then create the connective tissue on top that is now codified in legislation and has a sustainable, buy-in from the legislature and the executive branch. Another one was Ohio. So Ohio did something which Robert mentioned earlier, which was they used SWICAP to finance their maintenance costs. So if you think about most of the federal funds that are going out for dedicated stuff is for build. And no one says, and here's how you can maintain it. Ohio figured out that, hey, we have a data platform. It's a central service. It needs to be maintained. So we'll build it into our statewide cost allocation plan, financed with indirect costs, which are substantially funded with federal funds. They submitted their plan to HHS. HHS at federal level gave it the thumbs up, and they now have a sustained, predictable funding stream for maintenance. And that should be the standard. Like, why isn't every state and local government doing the same thing?
Thank you. So at ETA, we are focused on 4 pillars, which include expanding opportunities for underserved workers and communities, industry partnerships for real good jobs, building a better care economy, and taking action today for the future of work. And one of the things that Jen Ingle said in her keynote earlier was that the power of data is that it changes lives, and I think that's really one of the most compelling reasons for us to be involved in this work is that having quality data, good analytics is really what can help us move the needle and support the 4 pillars. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about that we have been very excited about is an initiative that we have funded the Workforce Innovation Technology Center at NASLA to do, and that's the Aligned Case Management Consortium, or ACM. And one of the questions earlier to the keynote was mentioning, well, what happens when grantees have to spend all this time getting their data together and there's all of this difficulty at the beginning? And the truth is, in order to have quality analysis, you need to make sure that you have quality data, which all of us know. So we have been trying to think about how we could support states to ensure that across their partners, they really were getting the best data possible and were coordinated in their case management systems. This is really at the entry level for data intake. There was a time when we talked about it as integrated case management. We very swiftly, by talking to the field and really doing a human-centered design approach, found that the need that needed to be met was not to create some sort of huge federal system, but instead to think of how we could support states to solve their own problems in this area and come up with solutions that met their individual needs. So a team from WITSE has been working with a cohort of 5 states to address their individual problems, whether it's being aligned on definitions across different parts of the workforce and social services ecosystem, or other parts of their work, and developing from those 5 states a toolkit that's really foundational to human-centered design to make sure that other states could then adopt similar practices and make their own improvements so that the data in is also getting exactly what they'll need on the outside. And hopefully they'll be doing another round of a new cohort in the new year, so stay tuned.
Thank you, thank you. I really appreciate both the mix of, some federal kind of innovation within some of these programs and initiatives, as well as specific work that we're seeing in states, and really kind of hearing the relationship in between those two, I think is really unique to this work. So let's change gears just a little bit and talk about emerging innovations. And Tiffany, I'll look at you first this time. So with more focus and priority in states and systems on cross-agency or even cross-state data linkages, what are some of the emerging innovations you're really seeing that are on the horizon, either for states or for these same initiatives?
Thank you. I know there's been a lot of talk over today, and I'm sure yesterday, about the ADA training, and I couldn't possibly sit here and not actually express how valuable we at ETA find that training. It was mentioned that there's very limited resources, and we can't necessarily, with the flip of a switch, increase appropriations and our support of state programs. And so the ADA training using the ADRF has really been an opportunity for us to support the field and make sure that the sort of latest tools and techniques, as well as data sharing, is able to happen at the state level and to connect data across state lines as possible, as much as possible. So it's not new to anyone here, but we definitely see that as something that's critically important. And just last Friday, or last week, the most recent cohort of ADA states presented on their projects. And I thought it was phenomenal, and it was great to learn that apparently it was just beyond phenomenal. And we're really excited to think more about how we can use our platforms to amplify that work, because it's great that more and more states are participating in the training and getting connected to the multi-state data collaboratives. And one of our charges to NASWA in this past round was to make sure that new states that hadn't participated before were involved, and they absolutely delivered. And it's just very important to even make it more broad and think of ways that others can sort of see for themselves in venues outside of ones like this.
Thank you. Kathy?
So I'm going to mention a few things that seeds are planted, things are growing, and now it's time for everybody to kind of put the pieces together. So first of all, at the federal level, I think the feds have recognized that, hey, there's huge gaps between these high-performing states and localities and the low-performing ones. And there's not that many really high-performing ones that are linking data across different sectors: education, workforce, health, social services, criminal justice. So they have, the feds, the Office of Management and Budget, is in the process of revising their government-wide grants guidance. It's called the Uniform Guidance. They put out proposed guidance in September, and it's due to be finalized soon. But it does something new. it has explicit language that says grant dollars may be used for data and evaluation and integrated data systems as either direct or indirect costs. It's essentially giving permission to all jurisdictions to do what these leading jurisdictions have been doing, but nobody's been talking about it. And in fact, because there's such confusing guidance coming out from different parts of the federal government, OMB, HHS, GAO, different federal agencies, on what funds you're allowed to use and how they can be combined. Even highly paid consultants who advise states on what's possible are saying, oh no, you can't do what Ohio did. That's not in accordance with the HHS cost allocation guidance. So the OMB guidance, I think, is going to be setting in motion a lot of effort to create consistency and clarity across the different agencies. Then let's look at states. So one of the great conversations I had a week or so ago was with someone from Rhode Island, Jonathan Wilmer, who co-authored this paper with me. Rhode Island has issued an executive order, and the executive order is looking ahead to say, we are going to connect our separate integrated data systems for SLDS and HHS so that we can understand a lot more aspects of what individuals and families experience and how well our programs are working. And then with that as their foundation, they can really think about AI. Like, how do they make sure they have really good data quality and that they can have insights using AI tools that they otherwise wouldn't be able to really use? So pointing to the future, and it's something we could all learn from. Lastly, because this cost allocation stuff is so complicated and nerdy, I currently am working on a project which I hope will be available as a resource for people, say, this summer. And it's to create a practical field guide for how states and local governments can finance integrated data systems by, first of all, leveraging untapped sources of federal funding that they didn't know they were allowed to tap, and then combining them in creative ways, as Robert Magoo mentioned, using cost allocation, setting up accounting systems and accounting methods that the auditors will say, yeah, that's okay, you've met all of our requirements. Because often it's that, I'm looking at Dean Falkers, he's there, right? It's often the fiscal staff and the auditors that are so entrenched in their view of how you have to keep funding separate, that the obvious, most cost-efficient ways of combining funds are not pursued for that fear that the feds are going to take the money back. So I think that opens up some possibilities that hopefully you all could take advantage of. And I'm just going to plant a seed because I know philanthropy is following us. Simply giving permission to use funds differently is not enough to change the game in terms of all of the sort of entrenched bureaucracies and relationships. And I really think there's an opportunity here for philanthropy to provide some financial incentives for state and local jurisdictions to reimagine, think much bigger about what's possible, imagine that re-envisioned data ecosystem and how to leverage all those federal funding streams and combine them along with some of their own funding, but in ways that really could boost capacity significantly. And it gets philanthropy out of the business of doing one-off projects that die because they don't have a sustainability plan.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. So I want to highlight just a couple of pieces because now I'm thinking back on that opening keynote when we were doing the really fun, what was it, the Menti, right? The Wordle. Yeah, the word clouds. There we go. Wordle. Oh, the word clouds. And so one of the questions around like what the limitations are, and I remember seeing capacity really showing up there. So Tiffany, I appreciate kind of your nod to like, here is an example of how you can actually utilize some of these federal funds to help build out capacity and hopefully sustainable capacity within your state. And then also acknowledging that that's not the same state over and over again taking that training, but really expanding that throughout. And then Kathy, I think, talking about some of the emerging, by the way, I can't help but love that we have really kind of operationalized as emerging in this thing is something that at least has the foot in the door. And so some of the changing guidance that we're really seeing, which I think really helps lead and help states understand how they can really use this for that next set of wherever they are and really leveling that playing field, right? So coming from a state like Kentucky with a really rich history, of data sharing, data use, and then thinking about Pennsylvania, for example, which has a much more, I'll say, federated, where there are pockets of success. It really helps to level that playing field by being able to utilize some of these federal funds in different ways. So now let's talk just a little bit in our final minutes about not things that maybe don't even have a foot in the door yet, but what are some real, some real innovations that we might see from the U.S. Department of Labor or other agencies that really can help spur something different within states, spur more innovation, spur more opportunity, including maybe interactions with philanthropy.
So I'm going to highlight two. One is something we're actually in the midst of right now. Yes, it's just a toe. And that is in some ways related to collaboration, which was a big word in the final word cloud. Oftentimes we don't hear enough from the field, or the field doesn't necessarily feel like they have the access to staff at the Labor Department to learn more about what their needs are. So we're in the midst of hosting listening sessions about the workforce data ecosystem. We had one last week. There's two more coming up late this month and in April. They are hosted by my colleague, Emily Thomas, who's the department's chief data officer, and I'm pointing her out because we realized that we don't have a website that's easily findable. So if you're interested in participating, you can talk to myself or Emily or our colleague Kyle, who will raise his hand in the back. And it's really an opportunity for us to listen to what your pain points are and think more creatively about what the solutions are, and also be able to clearly acknowledge that there might be some times that there aren't solutions that we can do within government. And so that's definitely a learning experience all around. And it's really to create actionable items, not just for people to come and listen, but we break out into little rooms and have much more deep discussions. The thing that's coming up that we're thinking about is possibly doing a request for solutions through America's Data Hub, which is in order to think more about piloting a national secure data service and what sorts of projects could we propose and get proposals back for that would both meet a need within workforce data and serve as an excellent example of why it's necessary to have a national secure data service. So that's very nascent, but it's coming up.
Great.
So the OMB guidance, right, that'll be permission for everybody to be able to tap into funds, but you have to convince program offices that control grant funds that you've got a value proposition that it's going to be that they'll want to invest in. Where you can have real incentives for moving in that direction is agencies that make grants. So I'm going to use the education department as an example. They recently put out a request or put out a proposed rule for their education department general administrative regulations, EDGAR. And a bunch of us in the room looked at those and said, well, this is great. This is moving in the right direction. It's putting some more emphasis on continuous improvement, but you could go farther. And some of the recommendations that as a group we made back was, hey, leverage the OMB guidance so that your EDGAR provisions, first of all, are fully embracing them and clarifying for the field that there is permission to make these investments and use grant funds. But go further. Your competitive grant selection criteria could be set up so that you're awarding more points to those grantees that are using a portion of their funds for reusable evaluation templates, reusable data infrastructure that's not only helping you evaluate that program and that project now, but it could be reused and scaled and used much more broadly by projects in that same jurisdiction or potentially others. Again, thinking back on the Coleridge conversations of how much sharing is going on. But I think you need that financial incentive in the grant making to make a difference.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Coleridge, by the way, for bringing together these two. Their wealth of information, and now you all know why there has been a line to talk to each of you at each break. So it was such a pleasure to be here with you all today. I'm so excited about both the highlighted work that you all brought up as well as those emerging things. I was taking notes as I know many of you were as well. So thank you again, and you all made it through your session during lunch. So congratulations. And we're excited about the rest of the day. Thank you very much.